that was a big culture shock too, of like how much more relaxed they were and how much less disciplined they were, how much they didn't know a lot about their history. Like we're taught and it's grained the Marine Corps history, and you know, we sing songs about it, and we're proud about, being a Marine, and where we come from. And the Army is not the same.
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. I'm joined today by Ryan Landers. He is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine's story is the same. What is the same is the oath we all took. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Definitely been looking forward to this.
I have as well. And I think this is my favorite question, which probably why I ask it first. But why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
So, I've kind of thought long and hard about, really digging down to the reason behind it. I do have a pretty extensive family history of Marines. So, my grandpa on my mother's side was a Marine. His brother also was a Marine. And then kind of like a godfather who was, a big role model for me growing up, was also a Marine as well. So quite a few Marines in the family, and never really understood the importance of what they did and the time that they served, and just kind of knew. But the main reason is, I was in high school, um, not really doing that great, making good grades, just having fun. I cared more about having fun than I did grades. Didn't understand how important and difficult it was for the college process, and thought I could just, apply and show up to a college and get into school. And it's like, no, 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 that's not how it works. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I need another plan now. And then so, the buddy program, one of my buddies was like, hey, I'm going in the Marines. We can all go together. And I was like, all right, sure. Like, to me, it was more about it. What there wasn't a question about, do I want any other service? I was like, this is the hardest. I get to go with my friends. I get to prove to myself that, I can accomplish this and achieve something great, and really be like, hey, I went through the hardest boot camp that there is out there, and I made it through. And that was really my main reason behind it. It was to push myself to do something hard and difficult, and also an opportunity to go there with my friends. I had three other friends that we ended up going with. It was supposed to be four, but one of them kind of got delayed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So ended up going with just the three others. And, it's not exactly how they make it out to be. You're not in the same platoon together, riding it out and getting smoked together. You just get to leave at the same time, and maybe you'll be in boot camp together in the same platoon, but that's not how it worked. But it was a good opportunity because we all had a story to tell. We all got to talk about, our boot camp experience together when we were done, and go to the schools after and talk about, how school was after. So like it was it was good for me after the fact of like, hey, this was a great decision. Um, but like doing it was just because I really underestimated, what it was going to take to go to school and to go to college. And at the time I was working at a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't really looking for like, what does my future look like and what type of careers do I want to get in, and so I wasn't really identifying those type of things, and so it was an opportunity that presented itself. But before that, before I ended up joining the Marines, right, I definitely took the opportunity to go through the summer. And I was like, because I was talking to the recruiter, um, right? He was like, well, when do you want to go? Uh, hey, you graduate in May, we can get you out. And I was like, well, I want to wait till after the summer, right? I kind of want to have fun, enjoy my summer, and then I'll go once it's over. So, I mean, that was a good opportunity to kind of get everything out of my system and have fun and just enjoy being out of high school and, you know, being 18 and working for a little bit, hanging out with my friends, and then, going to boot camp in August after that. So it was definitely good. I'm glad I didn't get in trouble or do anything to kind of mess that up and jeopardize it. That's kind of like it's a tough call sometimes because there's
Yeah.
definitely a lot of potential to mess it up. Um, but it was a good decision for sure, and I'm glad that I wasn't doing it alone, which I think would have made that decision to join the Marines a little more difficult.
Hmm.
But also, right, I remember talking to my mother and my stepdad. My stepdad was in the Air Force. They were trying to convince me, like, with everything they had, to like not join the Marines, like join the Air Force. It's better. Trust me. Like you'll like it better. And I'm like, no way. That was just driving me to not want to do it even more. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to join the Air Force. Like, I'm definitely being a Marine now. Like, you're not going to convince me to do otherwise.
Hmm. I think there is a beauty of like that last summer after you've graduated high school where like you're an adult, but like not quite yet. Like if you're able to like be in that almost like limbo and acknowledge you're in that limbo, there is something really beautiful about that. Because I went to boot camp in September, um, because of the MOS I was waiting for. But I remember
Right.
that last summer, and it was just like, yeah, there was some like magic and like just I don't know to it. So I completely agree with that. But three of you, so no, four total, went to boot camp together. That's wild. Did you guys all pick your MOSs beforehand too?
Um, I know two of us did because we had the same, we thought we were picking the same MOS. So, like, that whole process, looking back of like how you choose your MOS and like what I wanted to do is wild because you don't really know. It's kind of like, here's a branch and you'll figure out specifically where you're gonna go later on when you get to school. And I was just like, all right, whatever, like I'm down, like this is what I want to do. And my mom worked as like a paralegal for a long time. So like that's what I knew. And I was like, cool, I'm gonna do legal stuff
Yeah.
and be like a paralegal. And they're like, yeah, yeah, sure, not a problem. It didn't work out that way.
I was about to say, is that
Um,
what you ended up getting or no?
no, not at all. I ended up being 0121, so personnel clerk. Um, but and my other buddy that was in like the same field, we ended up going to school together, but he went to a different MOS, which is 0151, administrative clerk. And so like that whole process, you going into it thinking that you're going to do something because that's what you have your mindset on. And the Marine Corps is like, no, 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 that's not how it works. Like we're gonna tell you what we want you to do, and you're gonna like it. And so, like that whole process, I think my other buddy ended up being infantry, and then the other one, I don't even remember what his job was, because we lost contact like after boot camp. I don't remember where he went, but it was like he had a different job and ended
Hmm.
up going somewhere else, and we just kind of lost contact. This was 2003, so like I wasn't uh, really good with how you keep up
Yeah.
and communicate with people. It's, hey, I don't really have a cell phone or a need for a cell phone or want a cell phone or
Yeah.
whatever that is. So it was difficult and it was different. But that was definitely also a big shock showing up to school, right? And kind of like, hey, this is what I'm gonna do for my job. And they're like, no, no, no. And I remember the experience like so vividly, being at MOS school and being there. And they're like, all right, when I call your name, you're gonna stand in the group to the left. And when I call your name, after all those people, like you're gonna be in forming up on the right. And it's like, if you're on the left, this is your MOS. If you're on the right, this is your MOS. And I was like, wow, so this is what we're doing. This is how we're finding out. Okay, like great. That's a
Awesome.
surprise. Yeah.
So after you went through MOS school, what was your first duty station?
First duty station was Okinawa, Japan. And when I tell you that still to this day is one of the best places that I've ever been, I loved it. I had a great time there. Uh, I know a lot of people that go there enjoy it. I know a lot of people that go there and get in trouble. Um, but I had such a great time. Enjoyed myself. I took up snorkeling. Um,
Oh,
took up so many hobbies. Tried to explore and do as much as I could. Made a lot of friends with you know, a lot of the Japanese personnel that were working on base because of my job. I dealt a lot with finance, and they had a lot of locals working on base, doing a lot of positions, and just like interacting with them every day. Became friends and started hanging out and being more immersed in the culture, and just like, hey, I love it here. So I was supposed to be there a year. Um, Worked in the IPAC, which is the Installation Personnel Administration Center. So we dealt with like all the administration stuff for everybody on the base. It was a great experience. It was a good time. I learned a lot, met a lot of good friends, and I think it got to the point where it was like, "Hey, do you want to stay longer, another year?" And I was like, "Wait, I can stay here longer. I don't have to leave." It's like, "Sure, sign me up." So I extended for a second year, and there was like a lot of restrictions at that time, um, with like yellow cards and green cards, and having a curfew, and you can go on base, uh, or you could go off base, but had to come back on base at a certain time if you had the red card, and but if you had a yellow card, then you can kind of go freely, and like that was my goal. I was like, hey, I'm really good. I don't get in trouble. I follow the rules, right? I'm really motivated. I get after everything that's kind of coming my way. And so once I extended to go there the second year and it got approved, I was like, great, here's two things that I want to do. One, I was uh trying to think of E2. I don't remember when I became Lance Corporal exactly, but I'm pretty sure it was like that second year. And so I wanted to get a driver's license, which was unheard of as like a single Marine E2 over there. Like people were like, you are out of your mind. There's no way. And I was like, and I want to ask for a yellow card. And they're like, you want to do what? And they're like, no, no, like that is not going to happen. And I just took it and was like, cool. I am now even more motivated to prove everybody wrong because you're all too scared to ask for it. I was like, I would rather ask for it and then tell me no, right? Than you not even ask for it because you're just ruling yourself out. So I put in the work and I requested for the yellow card, and it got approved. And people were like, wow, how did you do that? And I was like, I asked for it. I'm good. I stay out of trouble. I was like, I'm here for a second year. I'm like, I just do what I'm told. I was like, and everything else kind of follows suit. And then I requested for a driver's license. And the benefit, like one of the things that kind of helped out was because of where I worked, we had to go and pick up mail, which means I had to learn how to drive. And in Japan, you drive on the right
opposite.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah, the right side of the car and the left side of the road. But like I was driving on base already. I was stationed at Camp Butler, but I had to drive to Fatima, which is the air base in Okinawa, a lot to go over there because we had units over there, and they had, to give us uh, a lot of their administrative paperwork. So it's still like, hey, we're not sending a lot of digital copies of things. So it was still a lot of paper copies and printed out. So I had to go and make a lot of trips to pick things up. Um, and so it gave me a lot of experience on the road. So it was like, I'm already driving. I don't have any accidents. I know what I'm doing. I'm staying out of trouble. Like, where's your justification to tell me no, other than like, hey, my rank? And so I really fought for it. And put it all together and was like, here's all the reasons why I'm already doing these things for you, for the Marine Corps. And now I'm just asking to do it for myself personally. And that got approved. And I was so excited. I mean,
Did that
it
mean
was,
you got to explore a lot more of Japan then too?
oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, being there, it was like still kind of recent to when Fast and Furious came out. So I was like, ooh, I'm going to get a Skyline. Um, like that was my big thing. I was like, ooh, I'm in Japan, like I'm gonna find a Nissan Skyline. And for sure I did. Uh it wasn't a super expensive, nice, fast one, but it
Yeah.
was just the body style. And it was something that I could say, ooh, I drive a Skyline. It was more about that than anything else. And it was so cool. And I was so happy. Um, but it allowed me to explore Okinawa that much more. And I mean, anytime I wasn't at work, I was on the road. I was at a beach. I was staying at different hotels. I was just, trying to get out and see as much of Okinawa as I could and do as much as I could because I realized, like, man, this first year flew by, and now I'm on my second year, and I'm like, second year is already starting to fly by even more. And now that I have this vehicle, I was like, man, I'm just going to be on the go all the time.
Because
And so,
well, I think what happens to a lot of like junior Marines and like first duty stations is there's all of these factors, right, that may affect them, like not exploring and all of these things. And I think it feeds into like a negative or not liking a duty station when it's like if you just went out and did more things,
right,
like if you just immersed yourself more in the environment and the outside of base, I think most people that would change their like perception and their experience of it. What was maybe like your favorite part of Japan or your favorite place that you visited there, or just even just like in general, your favorite thing to do?
so there's two pretty significant events that I got to do while I was there. One was the Naha tug of war, which is like the world's largest tug of war. And I mean, like, you have thousands of people behind this giant rope on two opposite sides of the city pulling in this tug of war. And I mean, like, it's,
Wait, on opposite sides of the city.
yes,
That is wild.
it is. I mean, it was incredible to see. And I mean, like, they had to have a crane that lifted like this large piece of wood. And so, like, the two ends of the rope that they connect are kind of like an eyelet. And so they
Hmm.
put them together, and then they use this crane and lower down this large piece of wood that they insert in between them to connect them. And then once that's done, then they have like little strands of rope that they have connected to this larger rope. And I mean, like when you're standing next to it, I'm not very tall. I'm only 5'5", but like when I'm standing next to it, it's above my head. And so like that's how large the rope is. And it's crazy, it's wild, but it was a great time. It was a great experience. I got to go out there and be a part of it. And it was just it was awesome. I got a piece of the rope because when you're done and you get to cut a piece off. So I still have a piece of the rope from that I've carried with me all these years. I'm looking to hopefully one day like put it in a shadow box and get it mounted. And I have
Yeah.
this uh, t-shirt from the what is it? It's like the Single Marine Program t-shirt that was like sponsoring us to go out to be a part of that event.
Hmm.
And so I still have the t-shirt for that says, Naha Tug of War on there. And it has a picture of like the ropes connected on the back. So it's pretty cool. So I want to like put it all together one day, when I am done moving.
Yeah.
And so I can kind of display it and I can have that story to tell. And then people are like, oh, what is that? I can be like, let me tell you about how this is. And then now that you have YouTube and stuff, you can go and watch videos and look it up and stuff. So I can kind of show people rather than trying to explain it. But it was wild. It was awesome. It was a great time. And that's the type of stuff that made me enjoy being there and wanting to stay there.
And you said there was a second event too, or a second
Right.
experience. What was
And
the
so
second one?
the second thing that I was able to do, and this was my second year. So the first year, right, I was at uh on the main camp at Camp Butler. And then the second year, I moved units out of the IPAC into the G1 headquarters for Marine Air Wing. And that gave me the opportunity to take like an office group trip. And we went to Mount Fuji, and we hiked to the top of Mount Fuji as like a work trip. And we flew from Okinawa to like this Navy base that was there. And then, ended up staying on a base as close to Mount Fuji as we could get. And then got in a cab, and the cab took us to the base of Mount Fuji. And we were like, all right, we started early in the morning and we hiked up and we ate up there and then came down. And so I have this really cool walking stick that you get at the bottom, and I don't know what it is, but they have like mile or kilometer markers as you continue to go up, and they kind of like burn in your wooden walking stick on there each kind of like checkpoint that you go to. And the goal is like to get to the top and then get the top one saying you reached the top of Mount Fuji. And so like that was a great experience. And we are all up there with our rucks, because even though it started warm, the higher you got up, it definitely got cold. And by the time we got to the top, I was like, okay, time to pull out the jacket. It's like, I'm a little cold now, even though we just worked a lot trying to get up here. But it was wild to see just like the older generation of Japanese just kind of like trucking it up Mount Fuji. Like, yep, we do this on a daily basis, like move out my way. And here we are as a bunch of Marines, like
struggling.
Wow. Yeah, struggling to go up there, just kind of like, man, way to make me feel bad. Appreciate it. Good for you. But it was great for team building. It was a great experience, and I got, again, something to take away from that, because I still have the staff, the walking stick today with the Japanese flag on it, with the brandings along the stick as well, and it's a great memory of something that I accomplished. And great memories. Again, like not big on digital. The only bad thing about like a lot of that stuff is no cameras. So I don't have pictures of like those events and things that we did, just because it wasn't big. So it's kind of, I have the memories and I have the items that I was able to take away from that, which is why I really cherish it, because I don't have the photos of like, look at the things that I did, which I think is a benefit of today's generation of, having the cell phones and being able to take pictures of everything, because I was able to do a lot, but like there's really not a lot of proof or memories of that outside of just the experience itself,
and being able to like not having as much to be able to just like show people in general.
Right.
Yeah.
The Oath We Took podcast, hosted by Marine Corps veteran Tab Bartley, tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines who served. While every story is unique, the common bond is the oath they all took. Tune in Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wreaths Across America Radio to catch these engaging conversations. Tab is also supporting the Military Women's Memorial through her Wreaths Across America sponsorship page. For every veteran's wreath you sponsor at wreathsacrossamerica.org/theoathwetook, $5 will go directly to the Military Women's Memorial, the leading memorial and education center honoring the commitment, contributions, and experiences of servicewomen. Once again, to donate, go to wreathsacrossamerica.org/theoathwetook.
So how long were you there for? Was it 2 years, or did you extend, or did you end up going to a different duty station?
Yeah, so it was just the 2 years. And so I was very, very grateful during my time in Japan to have some really good mentors there. And one of them at the time, it was Sergeant Molina, right? Really good NCO, really good person. And we're still friends to this day, right? So we're still friends on Facebook. And, I watched him retire out of the Marine Corps as a master sergeant, which was awesome to know that, like, hey, I saw him when he was a sergeant. And it was great to kind of see the career progression. And he ended up actually going back to Okinawa and retiring out of there. So now he's a civilian out of Okinawa. And I was like, man, that is the life. That's awesome. Like I would love to do that. But I spent the 2 years there, and then, kind of being in the position that I was in, working in the G1, we had a little bit more connection to the monitors and like where we can go. And so like my gunny at the time was like, hey, you do really good work. Where do you want to go next? And I was like, oh, okay. Like what are my options? I was like, I want to go back to the South, right? I'm from Louisiana. I'm from the South. I want to go back there. What can we do? And she was like, okay, there's an I&I position in Huntsville. And so I tried to get there, but they didn't want me because I wasn't a corporal at the time. And so like I was like, in my mind, okay, if I'm a lance corporal today, but I get promoted tomorrow, like what's the difference in my capabilities other than my rank? And they didn't see it as that. They wanted an NCO there in that position. And so they wouldn't accept me. And then fortunately enough, there was another I&I position in Gulfport, Mississippi, opened up at the CB base there. And so I was like, I'll take it. And so I PCS from Okinawa, Japan to Gulfport, Mississippi on a Navy base, and was responsible for working with reservists at the I&I. And that was the last place that I was stationed. So it was right after Hurricane Katrina also. So like this was 2005, August 2005, Hurricane Katrina came through and I PCS'd in, I want to say February of 2006. So about 7 months after, and just coming back and like seeing the devastation of the coast, and knowing that like, wow, I'm PCSing to this place and it's still devastated and they're still in recovery was a shock. And it was a lot, but it was a good experience overall to know that I was going to a really good unit that also helped out in the recovery, and they helped out in providing aid and assistance, after Hurricane Katrina. And I enjoyed my time there. I learned a lot. We got really close with a lot of the reservists that we work with because it was an amphibious assault unit that we were there and supporting. So like learning a different aspect of the Marine Corps and just being like in a personnel section that's so big or so small, from like an installation personnel center where we didn't interact with a lot of different people, to working in a G1, which is even smaller unit, but at a higher level. And now I'm like pretty much integrated, with these amphibious assault units and getting to know them. And they're really good. And they're like, hey, come out to our motor pool and check out the space someday. And so like going out there and being able to kind of see what they do. And they're very inviting to a lot of the, I guess, amphibious assault personnel. So like a lot of the admin personnel, which I thought was really good, and trying to get us involved in what they do to understand, I think was really eye-opening, and got to do I forgot what it's called. But we actually got to go out, and ride with them into the ocean and the amphibious assaults, which was really exciting to just go from like, hey, you're going to feel like a sudden stop when we go from land to water. So just be prepared for that. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. So riding in the back, and then sure enough, we're going trucking along, and then just boom, it's almost like a complete stop once you hit the water. And then they turn it on. We're just out there in the water, and they open up the tops, and you're kind of just looking out, and the water's like almost right there. I'm like, oh, that's not scary at all. But it was fun. It was a great experience for me. It was a good time. I definitely enjoyed it. I think the only thing that kind of I always felt like I just was never doing enough, because I was trying to deploy, right? I joined in 2003, And the whole time, even in Japan, I was like, hey, how do we deploy? How do we deploy? And they're like, you're admin, man. Get out of here. You're not going to deploy. That's not a priority. And I remember when I was in Japan, to kind of go back to that, in Japan, we had one NCO come back from a deployment. And it was just kind of like, oh, wow, how did you do that? Like,
Mm-hmm.
how did you make this happen? Because I want to be like you. I want to go. Um, and it was just a lot harder and more difficult than what I thought. And then going to an I after that, they had just come back from a deployment. So I was kind of like, one of the new guys coming in after they had all been out on this deployment and kind of really built up the team. And even the admin personnel went out with them, the active duty personnel went out with them and deployed with them. And so they have that, camaraderie and that team cohesion built up. And I'm like, man, I really want this. And I missed out on that opportunity again, which means that they're not going to deploy again for a while, um, which was true. And I'm like, man, I'm never going to be able to get out there. And so you kind of have this sense of like, I want to deploy. I want to go out there and be part of the fight to feel like I'm doing something, even though I was doing something to help the Marine Corps overall. That's not what, in your mind, of when you join the military, of what it means and what it is. If you're not like in the fight, then it's kind of like, what am I really doing? What impact am I having? What difference am I making? And so it was kind of hard for me to really grasp that and understand that, like, all these people are going multiple times and people that don't want to go are going, and you have people that want to go and it seems impossible for them to kind of go.
And I think it's hard when you're so far removed from it, seeing it, like seeing that impact or knowing like what you're doing and like what the worth is, especially to like an organization like the Marine Corps where everything is like, if you're not deployed, you're not doing these things, then it's like, what are what are you doing as a Marine? Like, even though that may not be your job. Was that a driving force for you joining the Army? Did you join the Army right after the Marine Corps, or did you have space in between the two?
So after my time was up in the Marines, they tried really hard to get me to reenlist and to stay. And they're like, hey, we'll give you a $10,000 bonus. And I was like, nah, like, I'm kind of done. And so the driving factor to get out of the Marine Corps was really just like overall how I was being treated. I never felt that like I was treated as a person. I felt like, they just treated me disrespectfully a lot of times, and I only could take so much of it. So once the contract was up, I was like, there's no way I'm staying in. And I think one of the deciding factors was like at my last duty station at the I, there was like an old, and it's crazy how vivid I remember this event happening and kind of like the tipping point of I'm done. There was like this old paper or something that was on the wall, and the first sergeant came in and he was like, he took it, reached it, ripped it off the wall, threw it on the ground, and then was like, hey, Corporal Landers, pick this up, put it in the trash. And I was like, what? You literally just touched it, put it on the ground, and you could have threw it away, but now I got to go and pick it up and throw. I was like, I'm done. I'm done with this. And then that was kind of like, I just couldn't take any more of things like that. Like, I just felt like it wasn't the same. And maybe it was just that environment and that place, and things would have been different if I'd continued to go to other places, right? I do have good experience with Marine NCOs at other locations, but it was, those certain ones that just felt like they had to always, dig into you and get after you, and they're constantly yelling at you. And I'm like, hey, you can just talk to me about this. You don't have to yell. And it's like, no, you're going to do this now. And I'm going to yell and tell you how to do it. And I'm going to stand over you while you do it, and then tell you how you're doing it wrong and tell you to fix yourself. And I'm like, man, like that's a lot. Why are we like this? And they wouldn't listen. You couldn't talk to them. You couldn't do anything. And I think it got to the point where it's like, I'm just kind of over it. Like, there's nothing that anybody can do to convince me to stay. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed some of the people that I know now and that I met and got to serve with. But I knew that for me, like this wasn't going to be a career for me in the Marines because
Well,
of that.
well, especially when you said too, like you weren't even feeling like you were being treated like a person. Well, why would you
Right.
stay in that type of environment? Like that,
Right.
as good as things may be in other aspects or other things, if you're not even feeling like you're being treated like a person and a human, like there's just, you can't handle that for very long. That's just,
Right.
it's unreasonable to even ask that.
Right. And that was just, one of the reasons why I was just done, with the Marine Corps. It's kind of like a love-hate relationship, right? I loved it. I loved, what it was about, the symbolism of it, enjoyed it. But like the couple bad people that I experienced that were in it just made it not worth it. And that sucks. And I know that there's other people and other Marines that like went through similar experiences or even worse, having to deal with that. And um, it's a terrible thing to kind of deal with. And I knew that it wasn't enough. So my contract was up. I got out. I stayed in the local area. And when I tell you like I got out, I mean it was whatever mandatory class. I don't even remember what class I took to get out. I took it and got out, and that was it. I didn't go to the VA. Nobody talked about me about VA benefits, about claims, about here's how you set yourself up for success. I was literally like in one day and then I was out. The transition was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. And so like I got a job uh, working on the Navy base as a security guard. And it started out part-time, doing checking IDs at the gate and doing the vehicle inspections and things like that. But it was a part-time role and that just wasn't cutting it. So I had to get a second job. And this was 2007. So I got a second job working at like a place that's kind of like Chipotle, but it was a local place that had just opened up,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of helped them open their store. And so here I am working two jobs after, getting out with not really knowing a lot about what I'm going to do with my life, what's going on. I had gotten married at the time too, so like trying to deal with that, being newly married, transitioning out. There's a lot of things that were going on at one time with dealing with a new relationship and being married and getting out and working two jobs and not ever being home. And I'm like, man, this isn't it. This can't be the life. Like, I need to do something else. And then so my wife at the time ended up getting pregnant, I think in November timeframe. So I got it in August 2007, found out she was pregnant in November 2007, and was like, oh, I'm working two jobs. Also, we have a baby coming. What's going to happen? This is like, I can't afford this. This is going to be wild. And I was like, well, I got to do something else. So let me go back into the service. I knew the Marines was out, been there, done that. Didn't want to go back in, experience it. I was a little bit wiser at this time, and I was like, Air Force. Sold. Like, already know whose door I'm knocking at. I was like, I'm not going to make that mistake twice. So,
Mom, you were right.
yeah, pretty much. I was like, hey, I'm doing this thing, but I'm going to the Air Force this time. It's so difficult to try and get into the Air Force as prior service. When I went to their active duty recruiter, they're like, hey, the Air Force publishes a list of specific MOSs that we accept as prior service. And if your job is not on one of those lists, like there's nothing we can really do for you. And I was well,
what? I just have to pause a moment for that, because if that doesn't speak the volumes for like the Air Force and for like people wanting to join the Air Force from other services, like, no, the Marine Corps is the best, but I just have to say, like, listen to that. Like, listen to that. What does that mean?
And yeah, and that was wild. I'm like, well, I don't want to come in and do the same job. And the Air Force was like, well, we're only going to take you if you want to do the same job, so we can invest the least amount of money possible in you, and just teach you how to do it the Air Force way. And I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. I want a new job. They're like, no, that's not how it works. But it doesn't matter because your job's not one of them, unless you want to do security forces, because they're always taking that. And I'm like, no, I'm good, thank you. Hard pass on that. So then I was like, well, okay, maybe I could do the reserves or Air National Guard and then go active, because I know, having worked with the reserves, I'm like, cool, you can go in the reserves or the Air Guard and then become active. I was like, let me go that route. So I went and talked to them, and they're like, yeah, it may take you a year or more before you can, have the chance or the possibility to get on active duty. And I was like, well, that's not financially feasible either. That's not good. It's not going to work out for me. And then so next I was like, well, the Army. So I went to the Army recruiter and was like, well, I guess you guys are next in line. Navy wasn't even a question. I was like, no way. So I was like, the Army, I guess you're next in line. And so like a big thing for me, like transitioning out was, I thought that being admin, I can easily find another administrative job. But at the time they were like, hey, do you have QuickBook experience, which is how they dealt with pay then. And like, they're asking for a lot of other experience, where I was like, nope, I don't know how to do any of that. And so like, also in translating my skills over to the civilian sector, I didn't have any help with that. I didn't know, you know, what that looked like or how to do it to really put myself out there to be a good candidate.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew going into the Army, I was like, I want a trade skill. So I was like, either welding or heavy equipment operator. Like, those are two good ones. Welding wasn't available. And so I was like, great, I'm going to go into the Army then and have some type of hard skill that I can come out with and learn and, be able to get out and say, hey, I can do this, and be able to get a job using those skills. So after only being out of the Marine Corps for 4 months, I signed up for the Army and left in January of 2008 as a cargo specialist, where I went to Fort Eustis, Virginia for my MOS school. And because I was kind of like pushing my recruiter to like, hey, I really want to go. I understand school doesn't start for a little bit, but if you can get me out there sooner, like, I would appreciate that.
Yeah.
So even though my school didn't start till April, they sent me out there in January, and I kind of just hung out for a little bit, collecting a paycheck, which was a blessing in disguise, because, that's really where a lot of the struggle began, because I went from being a civilian to being in the Army the following day. It was like, hey, your report date is this day, go to your MOS school. I couldn't get on base because I didn't have a military ID card anymore. So that was an issue. All I had was instructions on where to go and where to report. No uniforms, no nothing. And so I'm trying to figure stuff out on my own, how to get to this MOS school. Where do I go? Where do I report? They're asking me all these questions, and I'm like, I don't know, man. Today's my first day in the Army. Like, I don't know anything.
So there was no like hand holding, no. That is absolutely wild to me, at least because of my experience in Marine Corps. Like, there is some serious hand holding when it comes to anything like that. Like, seriously, like, to the point of almost like you said, like, we don't feel like people. Like, there's a point of that where like a person, because it's like, no, you're gonna do this because the Marine Corps says, because we're not gonna like lose you in translation or like all of those things. So that is absolutely wild to me, for it just to be like, good luck. Like,
yeah, I agree. I thought that there was going to be more. I thought there was going to be, something more to it. And there just wasn't. And, showing up like that, and people were baffled at the fact that like, they just sent you here like this. And I'm like, yep, this is what you get. They're like, okay, So then once I figured out where to go and got to, excuse me, and got to the school, then it was, okay, well, we got to get you an ID card. Okay, well, that was a problem because after I got out of the Marines, I was still in the IR for the Marines. And they're like, well, we still have you in the IR. They have you in the reserves for the Marines. And I'm like, cool, well, I'm not. Obviously, I'm here. And it's not because I'm in the Marine Corps, like I'm in here to be the Army. So then it took time for them to fix that just so I can get an ID card. And I couldn't get uniforms until I had an ID card. So like I'm showing up to PT formation in civilian clothes, um, like, and they're calling all these commands and doing all these things, and I'm like, I don't know what you guys are doing. You're saying words and saying things, and I'm just standing there like waiting till someone does something, and I just do what they do, and they do something else, and I just do what they do, and I'm like, I don't know how you guys march. I don't know how you do your commands. It all sounds weird. It doesn't make sense. I don't know what you're doing.
So there
And
was
people
no
were
like transition. They didn't like
no,
have any like sort of like, hey, you were prior to a different service, so now we need to train you in the Army way, or like a modified like not boot camp, because you don't need to go to boot camp because again you went to Marine Corps boot camp, but you would think that
right,
there would be some sort of like at the very least classroom. Here's, the difference between the Army and other, branches.
right.
Because they
I
have to have a lot of people coming over. That's not like uncommon.
right. And so what I later found out is there is like this kind of mini basic that prior service go to, but you have to be out for a certain period of time for them to send you. And because I wasn't out for very long, they're like, you don't need to go. You still know how to do military things, so we're not going to send you that. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not at all how it should be. Yeah. I'm like, if you're prior Army, I get it. Things in the Army change. You need to go back and like relearn. I was like, but no matter how long you've been out, if you're coming from another branch, 100%, you should be going to some type of Army training where they teach you the rules and the regulations and the formations and how they do stuff the Army way. And like none of that happened. So like I'm in school trying to figure all this stuff out.
On top
And,
of like a
and
whole new career field and job and something you've never done as well.
right, right. And so like understanding how does the promotion system work and like, how, because the whole fight too was getting in was like, hey, I was a corporal. I've only been out 4 months. Like, let me go back in as a corporal. And they're like, no, you can't. You'll be a specialist. And they're like, but it's still an E4. I'm like, yeah, but it's not an NCO. So I don't care. I was like, I worked hard to get that. I was like, and the biggest thing is like in the Marines, right? It's a point system to get corporal and sergeant. But in the Army, it's a point system to get sergeant and staff sergeant. So like it took me almost 4 years just to make corporal. And now I'm in the Army as an E4 where it takes people maybe, a year and a half, maybe 2 years, or some people are coming in because they have school as an E4. And I'm like, this is wild.
We're
I
not
was
the
like, I
same.
worked.
We're not, it
Yes.
doesn't equal. Yeah.
And so that was another learning curve too, was like, how does the promotion system work? And it was like, no one gave me E4. Like I had to work and earn it to make it like promotion points. And so do the people in the Army, but for E5. And I'm like, great, now I have to go through all this again, to get promoted. And so like it took me at least, I don't know, to say 2 years or 3 years to figure out the Army, how the Army worked and operated and did things. Because I mean, I came in there like hard charging, hey, no walking and talking. Hey, stop chewing and walking. You can't drink and walk. Like, what are you
Fix your
doing?
hair.
Yeah. I'm like, what are you doing? You're freaking nasty. Stop doing that. And people were like freaking out. They're like, dude, what are you doing? They're like, we can do that. And I'm like, no, you can't. Well, you shouldn't be able to. So stop it. And so, like, having that mentality coming in, people were like, wild. And I was like, I've only been out for 4 months. So you can kind of think like it was still ingrained in me. It was part of me. I haven't really been out long enough for it to go away. I'm coming back into a military and just thinking like it just clicked right back of like, hey, I'm going to make sure you guys are disciplined because you're freaking nasty. And so that was a big culture shock too, of like how much more relaxed they were and how much less disciplined they were, how much they didn't know a lot about their history. Like we're taught and it's grained the Marine Corps history, and we sing songs about it, and we're proud about being a Marine, and where we come from. And the Army is not the same. And so like that was another big culture shock of how they didn't really care about those things. And I'm like, that's wild. You don't know when the Army's birthday is? Like, no.
Right?
How dare you? How dare you call yourself a soldier and you don't even know when the Army's birthday is? I'm like, man.
And how long are you still in the Army, correct?
Right. I retire in January after 21 years. So I'm excited.
What were some of the other, past that, which it's wild to me that something that had you gone to Army boot camp, it would have only been like a few weeks and you would have learned the things. But because of how you entered, it took you said years to like fully grasp and understand it. What were some of the other challenges, past that you can kind of look back and be like, because you were a Marine or because the Marine Corps, that like either you had to adjust or that you saw so differently to all your peers and stuff?
I think the biggest thing really was just like having to understand and be okay with things being different, and like there's going to be a lack of discipline, and hey, it's okay that they don't do things a certain way, and that they don't care about certain things. And just I think the biggest challenge was just accepting that it's okay, and that accepting that it's different and it's not the Marine Corps. And I met, I think, like 2 other prior Marines also when I was in school. And so like having that common bond with them and that understanding of, we would go to each other and be like, this is wild. Let me tell you what I saw today. Like, just telling each other stories and kind of reminiscing about when we were on the Marines. And so like one of the like running jokes that I always had when I was had first joined the Army, and people were like, well, why did you join the Army and leave the Marine Corps? I was like, I needed a vacation. And so that was always my response, where people were like, why'd you join the Army? I was like, I just needed a vacation.
But you had to figure out how to get into vacation mode. It was a struggle to get into vacation mode.
100%. And they're like, what? And I'm like, trust me, man, this is, the Army is a vacation and is a cakewalk compared to like being in the Marines and how strict and stringent and disciplined they are. I was like, this is easy. I was like, so that's why I call it a vacation, because that's exactly what it was. And I just had to understand that that's kind of what it is. And that's kind of how I guess related it back to myself and convinced myself that, hey, you need to kind of relax and chill out a little bit, because it is different. And having that understanding took a little bit of time, but when I did, things got a little bit easier for me. I do say being in the Marines set me up to be a better leader in the Army, though, because the Marines expects more from you at a lower rank than I think any other branch of service. And it shows, because they're asking E4s to do things that we had, PFCs and Lance Corporals doing. And even like Lance Corporals were doing things that sergeants were doing. And I'm like, this is wild. You got this guy over here doing this. And I was like, I was doing that when I was an E3. Like, why is he doing that? Why can't you do it? And, oh, I don't know what to do. And they making excuses. So being in the Marines first allowed me to really set myself apart from my peers. Even though I was an E4, I was a way better leader, because I came in experienced. I came in knowing how to lead and how to be in charge, because you just get put in those positions and you have to take that initiative and take charge and do these things when you're in the Marines, just because it's expected of you. And people are going to demand it from you. So you just have to do it. And so I just took that same view on it whenever I was in the Army. And, it allowed my NCOs in the Army to rely on me, to count on me. They put me in charge of people and knew that, like, hey, if I give you this thing, I know that it's going to get taken care of. I know that I can count on you to do things and to hold positions of higher responsibility. And even though it was kind of difficult, because I'm like, I'm not an NCO, why am I doing this? You know, it was a blessing in disguise because it helped me learn quicker about the Army way and how they did things, and continue to be a leader and to take care of other soldiers in those positions. And just, it was who I was. And so there was no fighting it. And it just, you know, I had leaders that made it easy, and they were like, hey, I'll let you take care of it. I'll let you, you know, be a squad leader. Even though you're only an E4, you know, that's fine. And so it was definitely good. And you could tell the difference between the prior Marines who came in as well, and that I got to work with, and just see how much better leaders they were than, you know, people who started from the Army and held the same rank. And I definitely think that's one of the best takeaways of being in the Marines, is like that foundation of building that character and teaching you to be a leader and teaching you how to lead Marines and teaching you how to lead people, carries over in every aspect. And so that definitely helped me, and still continues to help me stand out and be, you know, different than my peers and everyone else that I work with.
And I think it's the thing that I probably say the most about the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is the best at creating and making leaders and teaching you how to lead. I have not found anything better than the Marine Corps leadership traits and principles out there. I really haven't. I have looked. And that's just, to me, it's the most simplistic, just the best, the easiest to understand, and the easiest to, you literally can make those fit any situation, right? Like, not just the Marine Corps. And so I'm glad you answered that, because that was actually going to be my next question. But now, sadly, looking at the time again, I don't know where the time goes, but it's time for the last question already. And I first want to say thank you so much for sharing a piece of your story and for your service and being willing to share this, because I think, again, we were talking about this before we started recording. I know so many Marines who go to other branches of service after the Marine Corps, but then I don't really hear anything about that experience. And so I think it was very, very helpful and very enlightening to hear that. And with that, I will ask the last question, which is, if you had to take the oath again, would you?
I 100% would take the oath again. I've learned so much and have got to experience different places and become friends with so many different people. And I've learned so many skills and learned so much about myself and about the Marine Corps and about the Army and about everything, that I wouldn't trade it for the world. I loved the places and the people that I've got to see. I loved the experience of being a Marine and dressing up in dress blues and being the sharpest person there. And it's definitely different. I probably would have picked some different jobs along the way and chose a different path that way, but I wouldn't have chose doing it any other way, as far as like joining any other branch. I definitely think being in the Marines first was the right choice. And even knowing what I know now about like the Air Force, I still wouldn't have picked them over being in the Marines first, just because of what it gave me and how it defined me growing up in the Marines my first 4 years out of high school. And I wouldn't change that for anything. And I would 100% do it again and enjoy every moment of it.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Ryan's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the Marine Corps for the same reason. What is the same is the oath we all took, an oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I am going to challenge you to continue